Welcome everybody to SQL Friday episode 3. Today we have Mark Hayes on as a speaker. Mark is from Cork, Ireland. He's going to talk about Power Platform, rebooting your data strategy with the Power Platform. After this meeting, it's being recorded, so I'm going to edit the recording and put it up on SQLFriday.net. So stay tuned, probably tomorrow or even late tonight it's going to come up there. I'm not going to do a huge introduction, just mention the upcoming schedule. So we have next week, we have Gethin Ellis talking about the top 5 skills you need as a DBA in 2020. It kind of goes back 10 years or 20 years to see what did we think would be life in 2020 and what is it actually. So that's going to be a fun one, and well, you see them all on the schedule. We have a pretty good program. We'll see over the summer weeks in August if we get any speakers and attendees, but my aim is to fill the schedule for the rest of the year. I'm handing over to you now, Mark. Thanks for presenting to us. You can just take over the presentation.
Sure. Okay, so hello everyone. Unfortunately, you can't see me. Well, that's probably not a bad thing, maybe. Okay, but you know, it is nice to wave and say hello. So I am waving at my camera, but you know, I don't think you actually see me, unfortunately. I just want to make sure that people can see things in here. Okay, so Magnus, you might just confirm that my PowerPoint is visible just around now.
Yep. Looks perfect.
Perfect. So thanks very much, guys. So a little bit about myself. I'm Irish. I've been working in data for the last 20 odd years, pretty much always on the SQL Server platform, or analysis services or integration services or whatever you want to call that. Okay. I did have a little sabbatical when I went into SAP for a year or two, which was a horrible experience, and I came back to the Microsoft camp very quickly. So basically, what I'm going to be talking to you about, what I want to chat to you today about, is basically my own experience of building reporting solutions using Power BI, Power Automate, SharePoint, Office 365, and Teams. Okay, so as the title suggests, the technologies I'm going to be talking about is Power BI. I'm mainly going to be looking at the Power Query part of Power BI. We're going to chat about Power Automate, which used to be called Flow. We're going to be talking about SharePoint. We're going to be talking about Office 365, and we're going to be talking about Teams. So if you're not interested in any of those, you are in the wrong session. Okay, this is what I'm going to be chatting about. Before I get into any demos in there, I just got a couple of slides that we're going to talk through a little bit. And this one I call Data Projects 101. All right. So all data projects, no matter what technology you're using, they tend to have 4 key aspects. There tends to be something about getting data out of source systems. So in our context, we're going to be using Power Query or M or Get Data, whatever is your way of calling it, to do that. From a modeling, there then tends to be a modeling aspect to a data project, typically, and this used to be analysis services or analysis services tabular. Now we're going to be using Power BI desktop for the same thing. But the key part about modeling is that you're taking your data out of your source systems and you're putting it into a shape that suits your reporting need. Then there's going to be a visualization aspect to any data project. And again, this if we're here, it's going to be desktop, and Power BI plays that role. And then finally, there's a sharing part of your project where you're sharing it out to other users so you can get to it. So in all the years I've been working with data projects, you can generally segment them into one of those 4 areas is what you're doing at any one time. Yes, some projects will fall outside of that mode, as in you can have some projects that just go straight to the data, right? Where they don't really have to worry about getting the data out, where they don't necessarily have to worry about the modeling of the data. You're just talking about pure visualization and pure sharing. And that's perfectly fine as well. Some projects do fall into that one, but I guess the more complex ones kind of have that first 4 key aspects, okay? So in context of what I want to be showing ye, I've built up a demo that I'm going to kind of show you how I've built it and talk through the pros and the cons of the various different approaches of doing it, okay? But to talk about my demo, and it's very much real world based, I have a client it's kind of a mix of a couple of clients that I've popped in here, right? But a client came along to me one time and basically said, we want to combine our budget data, our company sales data, and our retail sales data together. Okay, and they're sitting in 3 different silos. So I got 3 sources of data. They wanted to go create some reports for their users. Their company sales they got from their ERP system. Their retail sales, so this is a wholesaler, so they sell product into supermarkets and supermarkets sell it to customers. Okay, so from the company's point of view, it's all about company sales. How much have we sold into our retailers? All right. The retail sales, however, is actually data that's sent back to the company saying, well, here's how well you're actually selling to end users in the marketplace. And these are Excel files that they got from what we call a data aggregator company. Okay, a company that basically just gets this data from lots of different stores, all right? So that was another source of data, Excel files that they receive on a weekly basis. I am calling out in here that these Excel files did not contain the corporate product codes. So the company sales will be against, say, code 123, but the retail sales could be against any code, right? Because you have no control over what that code is inside in the retailer. And then the third source of data they had was budget data, which in their case was Excel. They used to work it out in Excel and store it in Excel. Okay, so you can see straight away, if they ever wanted to do any bit of analysis across these 3 data sources, they're obviously, without a reporting system, they're straight into Excel, VLOOKUP, pivot tables, data dumps, data extracts, that good old way of doing things that lots of organizations do. Okay, so that's my demo. I'm going to show you basically how I kind of essentially addressed this issue, but doing it phase by phase, all right? So what I'm trying to almost represent in here is the first time you do something, this is how I approached it. But then as the technology moves along, as new features come into Power BI, as you want to expand out that infrastructure to support other things, you might make different, you make different design decisions the second time you go in and do it, and so on and so on. So let's look at phase 1. Phase 1, I'm just calling pure, it's just about modeling with Power BI. So as such, it's all about Power BI in here. I'm going to be using Power Query to get my data. I'm going to be modeling it inside in Power BI. I'm going to create some reports. It's inside Power BI, and then I'm going to share it on PowerBI.com. I was looking at this from an infrastructure point of view. It looks a little bit like this. I've got my source systems in here, and here's my 3 ones that I mentioned: budget, ERP, sales, and I've got a 4th system going on here as well. So that's just in here. So I just want to do a check that you can still hear me, because I just noticed I got a bad network quality message popped up. Are we all okay? You're still hearing me and still seeing me?
Now we do again. It was breaking up for a little bit, but you're back. I think from when you did the presentation to the SQL user group, when you used the pointer, that kind of affected the audio quality.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll keep an eye on that. I'll still play with it a little bit, and if it's consistent, I can drop the pointer. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So in the middle in here, this is a Power BI Enterprise Gateway. Okay, so this is a bit of an infrastructure that you have to install onto your network if you want your on-premise data sources to be communicating with Power BI in the cloud. Okay, so it sits inside my architecture in here. I'm not really going to talk too much more about this one. It is just a bit of infrastructure. It's quite straightforward to put in there. And then up in the cloud side of things, obviously we got Power BI, and my clients are connecting to it. So this is your classic. This is your standard. I need to develop something inside in Power BI. So let's go in and have a look at how that would be developed. So let's have a look at my what I'm starting with. And I mentioned in here I had a few different data sources. So for this demo, I'm just going to use worldwide importers as my data source. And specifically, I'm going looking at these invoice lines and invoice header tables. I have a few other bits of tables in here. I've mentioned retail sales, and they receive their retail sales by emails. So what that client is actually doing is receiving the email and downloading it, detaching it, putting it into a network share. So inside my network share in here, I've just got a whole bunch of Excel files have built up. And if I was to open up any one of those, it's very basic. Obviously, it's not the real Excel file. It's just one I've done for the demo. Oh, Should have loaded this up earlier, taking a little bit of a while. So here we go. So you can see it's quite a basic file, SKU code, a brand, and over here I've just got some values that I'm bringing into my data sets. Okay, so again, quite straightforward. If I was to go looking at my budget data in here, I'll open up my budget. This is my budget data. Again, product code going on there, except this time we've got all our budgets split out in a columnar fashion, which is a way I see a lot of budgets done inside an Excel, because accountants love their columns. They love putting their numbers out in columns. From an IT point of view, I hate columns. Okay, so that's going to be one of our challenges, that we're going to want to get those columns back onto rows, right? But that's what we're presented with, so fine, that's what we got to work with. So they're my 3 data sources. Now, I have here obviously got a pre-built solution that we can show you. This is my wonderful visualizations. Apologies, this is not a presentation on how to do a good dashboard. This is just a presentation on how to try to build it. But there is one thing I want to draw your eye to, which is that 47K figure up there, because if it's all is going well in my presentation, that figure should update automatically a little bit later on. Okay. But let's look at what we had to build here first. So I'm gonna flick into the model side of things. And here's my model that I wanted to build. All right. So I've got my retail sales. I'm bringing in company sales. I'm bringing in budget sales. And then I'm creating relationships between those 3 fact tables and dimensions. So customers, calendars, products. I'm using facts and dimensions because that's my background, Kimball, data warehouse. And I know inside in Power BI, technically it's all about tables, right? But to me, there's still an awful lot of validity in organizing up a star schema way of actually looking at your data, and an awful lot of benefits of doing that. And I mean, if you go talking to the likes of Marco Russo and these experts out there, they'll always time and time again be saying, you know, star schemas are good. So getting your data into a star schema view inside in Power BI is still good. So this is my model that I have here, but let's look at how we could go about building it. So if I start this from scratch, I'm going to start with my budget data, okay? And I just want to give you a bit of a flavor how you'd approach this. So my budget data is sitting inside an Excel file. I know that, so I'm going to go great. I'm going to go get data, get my Excel data. That goes in here. That's my Excel file. That's my budget file. So I go open up that. It makes a connection. And within a dramatic couple of seconds, it should bring back my data content. So in here now, I'm seeing great. I've got a table and I've got a sheet in there. They're the one and the same thing. So I'm going to click on my sheet, have a quick look at it, and I can see that, yeah, super. That's exactly what I was looking at earlier. I always love the way the Power BI gives you a nice big yellow button, as if like press that button and all your problems will be solved, when generally we have to hit the button right beside it. Okay, we're going to look at transform data first. So let's hit transform data, and it comes in here. Now at the moment, obviously ignore that I got lots of other things in here as well, because I'm looking at my built model. Let's just pretend they don't exist and I'm building this from the start. All right, so it's done a couple of things for me straight away. Over here I'm seeing applied steps, and it's put 4 steps in automatically for me. If I was to flick through them, there's my source connected to Excel. Then I pick down and navigate it to one particular column. I had to promote up my headers, and it did a few data types changing for me. So it's got a little bit of work done for me already. But the big thing that I got to change in here is those columns. Can you excuse me 1 second? My dog is scratching on the door, so I'm going to let him in.
Well, I have my son next to me watching TV, so well,
yeah.
Apologies from my side as well if you hear some kids movies. Then it's all good.
It's the whole work home experience in here, right? My dog is currently underneath my desk chair at the moment. Okay, so back to this in here, right? The next thing I want to do is I want to sort out these columns. So I'm going to select all those columns, okay, and do a transform and select my unpivot columns, and bang, like magic, those hated columns are gone from me. All right, so this has done an awful lot of work for me straight away. It's like, okay, now from a database point of view, this is in a much better shape for me. I've still got a little bit more work to do in here, right? I'll probably want to rename that to month or something like that. I'll change this to budget value so we don't get confused. Budget value. change that to budget value. And this SKU description over here is just horrible, right? So let's just get rid of that. So I'm doing a little bit of work, and now I've got my data into a shape that works a lot better for me from a reporting point of view. Okay. And again, over on the right hand side, we can just see how that's just built up a whole set of transformation steps that I can step back and I can do a replay on if I need to go back and check things. And if I want to look in that, what we've actually done is if I go into advanced editor, that's created M. All right, this is what we call M code. Okay, and there's basically just a list of all the steps that are going on there. And this is kind of important because I'm going to be using this a little bit later on to change my architecture a little bit. Okay. Now, I'm not going to build up everything. That's just to give you a flavor of how M works. But let's pick through to see how maybe some of the other parts in here. So to begin with, you see I've kind of got this little organized structure where, again, I'm using my Kimball notation of facts and dimensions, and then I got reference queries, things that actually aren't in my model but support my model. And if I go into facts, I can see, okay, I've got inside in here, there's my 3 main fact tables. So if I was to look at those 3 main fact tables, and again, on the right-hand side, I've got my steps. If I go looking at the source, you can see, reading, in fact, if I wanted to do it this way, go edit settings, you can see how my source actually was simply, well, I'm going to start by combining 2 tables. I'm going to start by combining invoice lines, invoice headers, I'm going to do a left outer between those joins. I'm then going to expand out my header table, and then I'm going to do a bit of change data types. So that query is in itself referencing one of my reference queries. And if I go back to one of my reference queries, I can see here's my original invoice header query, which was connecting to SQL Server. I appear to have locked up for a second. Okay. I go back into here. I can see how I've got that's simply a connection curve on there, and then out of that it went along and picked off a table and expanded the true, narrowed it down to bring in a narrow focus. Let's look at some of the other tables in here. If I go looking at my retail sales, this is an interesting one. There's a lot more steps going on. All right, that's because there's more work going on in here. I'm pointing this at a file system. I'm then picking out the files I wanted. We're doing a little bit of renaming of stuff. Removing other columns, and I end up with this view of just looking at my Excel files. And then the rest of these steps basically just go on and extract the data out of all of those source files in there. I could spend an hour at least chatting about these transformations. I just want to give you flavors of how the first time I'm doing Power BI, this is kind of what you end up with, okay? And having done all that work inside in Power Query, I won't do my changes just now. It means you can come into this place and you can start doing your data modeling, right? Where you can start up and something kind of go, okay, well, there's my budget data. And then I want to create a relationship between that and my customers. So I drag it in, and that's a stupid relationship because I don't budget by customers. So I'll bring in by calendar, and you can see in here, now it's automatically put in the relationship for me because it's already been built. But you can see how, in this case, there is a relationship going on between these 2 tables. And clicking on that, you can see where the relationship is fallen, and that looks to be out at the moment. So I'm actually going to fix that. There you go. That's what that relationship should be looking like. And then you turn around and you start building a report, and hopefully you'll build reports that look a little bit better than mine. But just to give you the basic flavor of working with Power BI, I'm going in here, clicking a chart, I'm saying, right, let's look at my retail volume. And let's look at my retail volume across the brands that are selling it in there, etc., etc. You break down. I don't want to trivialize what goes on in here. There is an art form to creating good reports, but this session isn't really about the specific reports I'm creating. It's just giving you the flavor of using Power BI, getting my data, doing my modeling, building my report. And then finally, on top of all of this, I go away, I do a publish on it. I'll publish it up to Power BI. Sure, I'll save my changes. I'll apply them later. And it shows in here all of my workspaces, and I can turn around and do my publish if I want to. Okay, so flicking back to my data projects, I've kind of rapidly gone through the first 3 stages, all right? I got my data, I've modeled my data, I've created my reports. The final part is doing the publishing. And when I do my publishing, I end up with a view that looks a little bit like this, that I'm inside in Power BI. And now I can go along and I can click on my particular report, and you can see it's running up in Power BI. And then again, drawing your attention to the 47K figure that we have up there, okay? So that's great. I've got a Power BI report created. Let's go back and do a bit of a critique of that, okay? So let's go back to my PowerPoint for a second. Okay, so this is all about modeling. This is the infrastructure I built up. We had a demo of how you can go about doing it. What I've ended up with is a single Power BI solution, one workbook doing my work for me. This is fine, okay? It's effective, but I would consider it a very standalone. It feels very isolated. It almost feels like it's not quite part of the business, okay? Because we've actually introduced in quite a few new things for the business in here. And the first thing you're going to be asking an end user to do is, oh, log on to something called PowerBI.com. And straight away they're going, well, that's not part of ours, right? So even though our data is in there, it's it's very standalone in there, okay? I kind of glossed over this point. I'll return to it in my second demo, which is I also had to do some additional data maintenance, which is just how to make this one work. But we'll return back to that in a second, okay? So it's there. It works. It's standalone. How can we improve it? So this is where I want to go on to my phase 2. So my phase 2 is my redesign and start leveraging Office a little bit. So Power BI is still going to play a very significant role in here. It's going to be responsible for my extract, my modeling, and my visualization. However, I'm now going to start talking about something called data flows and using data flows. So let's chat about data flows for a second. The big issue with my first way of doing this was I've done all this work to bring in retail sales, to bring in company sales. What if I turn around and have another model where I need retail sales or company sales? Does this mean I now have to start repeating my code in another Power BI data set? Now, one of your answers to that obviously would be, well, why should you be creating another data set, right? You know, just build it into your existing data set that you have in here so you don't have to worry about your reusing your code. But maybe there's some good reason for that not happening. And that good reason could be anything to do with the times that you have to refresh data, availability of data. It could be to do with maybe some weird security things going on there that you can't quite do in row level security. Or maybe it just feels like the right thing to do. Okay, maybe you're kind of going, it feels like that this data set that I have is different enough that I want it to be in a different location, all right? Because it's kind of a completely different side of the business. They just happen to have a data need in common between them, okay? So now I'm back to my problem about how do I share my code? So data flows is a way of achieving that by taking that Power Query that I had, putting it into PowerBI.com as a service, and then making it available to users up there. So you've abstracted the code logic, put it into PowerBI.com, and treating it as a concept on its own. So you're sharing data. You're not sharing a report, you're sharing the data. I want to bring Excel into play because while Power BI is a great platform for creating reports, it's not quite what I would 100% say a full ad hoc platform in there. Okay, and sometimes people just like to work in Excel. So I want to open up that option for them that they can be working inside in Excel. And then finally, I want to introduce Teams and SharePoint in here, all right, both from a point of view of maintaining data and also visualizing data, because Teams and SharePoint are more integral. They're more part of my company's organizations, okay? So it feels more natural if I can turn around and kind of go, okay, use Teams to get to what you need to do. And then you don't need to go to PowerBI.com. So my infrastructure looks a little bit like this now. So there's a couple of things that changed. To begin with, I still have my 3 data sources, but I don't have this 4th data source. And I'll show you this 4th data source in my second demo, okay? Basically, all it was an Excel sheet, and it feels very awkward being an Excel sheet. It just feels like I'm going to an Excel sheet purely to maintain a bit of data. That just doesn't feel safe, right? So instead, it's moved from here up to a SharePoint list, where now I feel a lot more comfortable about things, and I kind of lock down that SharePoint list a bit better. You know, less chances of people randomly deciding to delete a column or put in a column. All this kind of good stuff can be prevented in there. While I'm on SharePoint, I also want to make SharePoint my default place where people can access the Power BI report. All right, so they're not going to Power BI, they can see it inside SharePoint. Obviously, Power BI itself plays a big role in the middle. Obviously, our gateway connector still plays a role. Our internet browsers still play a role in here. But in addition, I now want to bring in my Excel and my Teams side of things in there. So I can say, okay, users can connect directly to it via Teams, and also they can be via Excel, and they can also be connected to it via Teams. let's demo that. Let's have a look at what this picture looks like. So I'm going to start with that data flow. And I'm going to go to Power BI, go into my data sets and data flows. So here's my data sets that I had in there, right? So up until now, my data set that I've been publishing up there is sales V1, and I've got a sales V2 in here as well, okay? But if I look up here in the top with a different icon, I got something called company sales. And this in here, as you read it, is a data flow, not a data set. And if I click into this, okay, it brings me into an entity called company sales. I can expand that down and kind of go, okay, that's what gets returned from this data flow. I can go in and do an edit on this entity. And it brings me into Power Query on the cloud. Okay, so here's my window that I was seeing before. You can see it's trying to do a connection in there at the moment. Let's step it back. Let's replay that back in here. You can see in there at the top how it's making its connection to a SQL database. And in here, I can see all of my tables and I can see my change type. So basically, I've lifted that logic that I had inside my Power BI model and I've put it up in here. If you wanted to do that again, okay, it would be canceling. Oh, sorry, back to my, I'll just bring it back into here. So again, going into my data sets and you turn around kind of going, okay, give me a new data flow. Do data flow, starting as a new entity. And now again, I'm seeing that same interface kind of saw before, not identical, but I'm seeing the concepts of I got all these categories of data that I can be connecting to in there. And actually one of them is a blank query. So the way I migrate a lot of my data sets is I go in to create a blank query. And then I got to populate that blank query, which if I go to Power BI and go back into my edit queries, okay, you could turn around and go, okay, well, I'm just going to take this query here and I'm going to go into Advanced Editor and I'm going to select my stuff, select my code, pop it back in. And I've pretty much done most of my work now. Okay, there's a few more little steps that I'll have to do in here, such as authentication and stuff like that. But really, to actually get your code moved up in there is not a laborious process to do this. Okay. So I'm going to cancel that out. I'm not going to finish building up this view in there, but it just gives you a flavor of how you can go about building those data flows. So I haven't got your data flow. What do you do with it? Okay, so let's hide view 1. And let's go into my V2 query over here. Sorry, I'm going to hide off Power Query as well so I don't get confused. Go into Sales V2. So Sales V2 is pretty much the same as Sales V1. In fact, if I look at it from a data model point of view, it's identical. Okay, company sales, retail sales, budget, calendar, customers, product. Okay, all that, the model is exactly the same. There, Magnus? Hello, Magnus, can you hear me? Hello? Okay, can you hear me again, Magnus? No, I can see you, but I can't hear you. Hey, Magnus, can you hear me there?
Yes, we can.
Okay, let's put that back in. Okay, can you hear me now?
I was muted. That's why you didn't hear me. This is embarrassing. We heard you all the time. Sorry, mate.
That's all right. We mightn't be putting this recording up on the web, right?
Absolutely. I mean, with or without the mistakes, it's going up there.
Okay, so sorry about that, guys. Oh yeah, I can see you all hear me. I should have looked at the chat window. Okay, sorry. Right, where was I? I was back onto my VM. So I'm still sharing. So let's hide Magnus's face and go back into here. Okay. Okay, so my model is still the same in here, but let's go in and how I built it. So I'm going to go in, edit my queries. And you'll see a lot of the same things in here. I mean, I still have reference queries. I still have my dimensions. I still have my retail sales, company sales. But let's just look a little bit at company sales. And you can see my company sales now, the steps, there's only 2 of them. There was more before. All right, there's only 2 now. And if I go back looking at this one on data source, you can see how my data flows is Power BI. Let's have a look how you would get that in there. If I start again from scratch, now knowing that I've got a data flow, I would go to new source. I'm going to go to more. All right, let's go to Power Platform. And in there, I can see a setting called Power BI data flows. So we'll connect to that. So this is now connect up and it's seeing all of my different data flows that I have in here. Inside in Reboot, I can go in, I can see company sales. I can click on company sales. It's showing me a preview of what we have up there. And we go OK and we load that. And now it's pulled down my set of company sales. So straight away my code base is a lot simpler. And if I have to repeat that in multiple data sets, you're going, okay, I'm not worried about that level of code repeatability because all that was connect to my data source and pull down my data. What's actually happening behind the scenes in there is the data flow inside in Power BI, it can refresh independently of your Power BI workbook, which means it's got to store its data, right? So it stores it actually in blob storage, in Data Lake Gen 2 blob storage. Now, if you do nothing in Power BI, it puts it into its own kind of hidden Data Lake Gen 2 storage area. So when you connect to Power BI to pull down that data, it's just connecting to a blob object and pulling it down. Hence, it's really generally fast from your point of view as a Power BI developer, because you're just going on, it's going to the data flow, it gets to a blob, it pulls down the blob, bang, there's my data. Even though the actual refresh time could have been substantially longer, because maybe that was connecting to a data source that was a little bit slow. Maybe you're doing a lot of transformation stuff in there, okay? So while the actual data flow refresh could take several minutes, when you put it down, typically you've got it down in a few seconds, right? No, that obviously is data volume dependent, but by and large, it's a lot faster. And it's a lot faster because it's not going straight to your data source. It's going to an intermediary point, which is a blob object. Interestingly enough, with that blob object, I said it's in Data Lake Gen 2. You can configure that so you can put it into your Data Lake Gen 2. So you kind of use Power BI data flows as a way of actually putting data into your own data lake if you wanted to go down that route. Obviously, you'd have to do more work in Azure to start using it, but it's kind of an interesting little use case of getting stuff into a data lake situation. So that's what a data flow is in here. I did a couple of more things in here as well. Remember we were talking about SharePoint and this master data list in there. Let's have a quick look at that master data list, all right? And my master data list looks like this. There's something called product master. If I open up that Excel file, all it's doing is it's maintaining a mapping table between one set of codes over here and another set of codes over here, all right? This is unfortunately a necessary evil for this particular client because they genuinely obviously have no control over the product codes that are used by retailers. So someone has to maintain this, an ugly thing to be maintaining. Not exactly proud of this as part of the solution, but it's just necessary. However, the fact that it's sitting inside an Excel is just worse, right? It's just like it's this Excel sheet that this person's maintaining. So what we could do is go to our SharePoint and go into SharePoint in here, and I've got my SharePoint home, and you're seeing lots of charts, and we'll talk about them in a second. But up here, I've got a list called Retail to Product Map. If I click into that, in here, I'm seeing that exact same list, but that's exact same data, but now it's inside in SharePoint. And this to me feels like it's a lot more of a safer environment to be working with in there, okay? We can add in a new map as needed, or we can turn around and swap that over into a quick edit mode and do quick changes inside and a kind of a grid interface in there. But the main thing is in there is it's SharePoint. I can secure this up. Only certain people can access the list, okay? They won't be adding in random columns. As a data source, it feels a little bit more mature for me, okay? So working with that data source, inside in Power BI amounts to this. So I'm inside in VO2, and I can see here how I have got my customer map and my retail product map, and I've just got a little SP in front of it. That's just my own little convention for kind of going, yeah, it's SharePoint, okay? And if I click inside there of my retail to product map, I can see here at the start, here's my connection I've made to my SharePoint tables, okay? And then the rest of it, so you can see all of my different lists that I have. And then I just navigate through, select the ones that I want, tidy it up a little bit, bring it down into here, do a little bit of change of data types, again, do a little bit of renaming, and basically get that exact same shape that I had before, except this time it's being sourced in SharePoint, okay? So that's another kind of change in here. Sourcing it from things from SharePoint, sourcing things from data flows. But when you do all that in the Power Query world, your actual data model change, because my data model change is still the same, because if I go looking at my product dimension, all right, the difference on my product dimension is its source is simply now my, it would simply be my SharePoint side of things in there. So you can kind of do stitching in the background to turn around and end up with the exact same data model in the end without having to go change things on your data model in there. So you do that, you'll then you'll still end up publishing it, right? So we'll go through the process of publishing up to SharePoint. But now the next thing is, or up to Power BI, but the next thing now is how do users connect onto it? And so before we saw how we did it in Power BI, and inside in here, we decided, okay, I have SharePoint Online, so why not create a SharePoint page that's got Power BI objects in it? And here's now my same object that I've had before, my same report, same interactivity that I've had before on it, except it's sitting inside in SharePoint, which if you're a user of SharePoint or SharePoint Online, this feels a lot more natural to me, right? Because I can just have this available, okay? Now, it's not quite the full Power BI experience. It is only limited to what you have set available as parameters in here. You can't access on filters. I can't go create a new report in here. But from an end user point of view, from a report consumer point of view, they're getting their data set in here. And also, you can do things if you want to have multiple Power BI reports in the same page. So what these little grids on the top is, that guy in there, you can see, okay, it's just doing a little bit of sales volume versus target, i.e. it's the same data sources I'm using down here. But these ones called sentiment are nothing at all to do with this data source. In fact, they're connecting to Twitter, all right? So for the last 2 years, I've been gathering Twitter sentiment on Brexit, okay, hashtag Brexit, okay, because, you know, it's important to us. And what this actually is this is giving me the average sentiment for the last 10 tweets that have happened about Brexit in there. So it's sitting at 0.44. So just slightly negative sentiment going on there at the moment. My average sentiment has actually finally moved. This was reading at bang on 50 for a long, long time. Okay, but now it's just slightly moved down to 0.49. I mean, obviously that's a very slowly changing number because I've got thousands of tweets captured at this stage, right? But that's my average sentiment overall. And what's happening there is we're catching the tweets, we're running it through cognitive services and putting it into Power BI. And we'll have a quick look at how that was built in there as well. But I end up with a kind of a portal. I end up with a dashboard that I can kind of give to users that feels a lot closer to them. Or I can do the following. I can go into Teams. And we'll see Magnus smiling at us. And now I'm going to flip out and go into Teams. Sorry, that was very brief. A very brief smile, Magnus. I'm going to go into Teams in here, and inside my Teams, I've got a Teams called Reboot. Okay, and if I go looking at it, well, it's my normal kind of Teams interface. I can have my posts, I can have my files, I can have my wikis, I can have all that. And then up in here, I've got Sales V1. So when I click on Sales V1, it now renders that exact same report for me with the same interactivity that I've had before on it as well. Okay. So now I've brought my report right into my user's virtual lap, so to speak. Okay, if there are Teams organizations, if they're using Teams, you're seeing it in there, and my filters are available in here as well. Okay. In fact, actually, this is going a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. Even with that one, I can click in here, and I can show a tab conversation based around this as well in there. So I can turn around and start communicating with people in my organization about a chat. When they receive that notification and they go looking into that chat, they're brought back into the same panel in there as well. So you really are kind of bringing your experience significantly closer to users. All right. Just for fun, I'll flick onto this one. I've actually got a second Power BI report in here called Visio Demo. All right, and this is a different talk that I do on how you can actually embed a Visio visual inside in Power BI. All right, so that thing up in the top there is a Visio visual. All right, and then down here, these are just standard data sets. But the whole thing to get it is they now actually interact with each other. So my concept here is about how you could have a CRM pipeline. All right. And when you're looking at it in here, you're kind of going, okay, clearly there are issues going along with parts of my CRM, which is ultimately having a negative impact upon sales. And then I can go back and go, okay, well, in January, it seems to be generally all okay in the pipeline. But in February and March, things really started kind of going downhill, and I can see clear issues. That's a little bit of a diversion, but it gives you a sense of how you can actually have multiple things sitting inside in Teams for users to be working with. Okay. So let's flick back to my PowerPoint presentation for a second, and I'm just watching time in there, so I'm a little bit behind time, but that's all right. We'll catch you up. So this is my demo. So I suppose the key differences in here is I've now got a single data source for multiple models for certain data, such as company sales, because I'm using my data flow. I'm using SharePoint for online data maintenance. I created a SharePoint dashboard into it, and pivot tables. I did want to show you the pivot tables. Okay, so let's quick out of this for a second. So this is great. I've got my report. Well, what if I want to get really ad hoc or create my own reports in here? Okay. So we probably know that if you've used Power BI before, you can create your own Power BI reports when you're up inside PowerBI.com. All right. I can click into my data set. I can see my content sales in there. That's great. I can go up here. I can click new report. Okay. I can go looking for my new report in there. Oops. All right, so there I see my sales V1. I go, great, clicking this. And now I'm in a blank screen environment, and I can turn around and go, okay, let's give me a quick little report on my retail sales again. And we'll split that out by my by the brand selling it. I end up with my new report, and that's super. I can go ahead and save that off. I've created a personal report for myself, okay, which is available inside in Power BI for me to go back to and look at any time I want. But there's another way I could look at it. All right. When I'm inside and looking at my report in here, I can turn around and there's a thing called Analyze in Excel. So let's click on that. And this downloads an ODC document. I'm going to click on that. And this is opening up. Unfortunately, it's doing it in a different screen for me. Okay, so you'll just have to bear with me for 2 seconds because I'm going to have to sign in. I can't drag it across until I have signed in because it's modal. Okay, so let's drag that in. So what's that done is it's downloaded my ODC. When I went to open it, I had to sign in there off screen. Okay, and now it's got a pivot table for me. All right, but if I look over here in my pivot table, all right, I'm seeing the exact same data structure that I've had before. It's the same data set. I've just gone to that data set that Power BI has, right? And now I can turn around in here and do something like, oh, I just need a product list of something like that, all right? So I'm going to go, okay, stock item name, stock ID, and give me the unit price and tax rate. I don't like that look of it in there, but it's fine. It's just a pivot table, so I'm going to change my layout to tabular, and that's great. That looks a little better, and we'll tighten this up in there. And now I'm working with my data inside an Excel environment in a real kind of ad hoc manner. And this is just Excel now. I can save this off. I put it locally, whatever I want to do, but it will be a dynamic connection to Power BI in the cloud, it hasn't pulled down a data dump. It has got a connection going up on the data set. So I can turn around and refresh it. Clearly, I'm not going to see any changes under that refresh, but it's got that connection in there. So it's really opened up the kind of the Power Analyst way of working with data. So let's flick back to my presentation. Okay, so that's what we've seen in here. So I think I've got a big improvement on my model here now. I've solved some little things, I've taken away some little rough edges, I've made it closer to my business, but what can we do next? Can we make it better? All right. So let's go on to phase 3, which is what I call the automate phase, because there is a glaring problem in this solution. If I go back to it, if I go looking at this part of it here, remember at the start I said they receive an email and he detaches that attachment and it puts it into a file share. All right. That feels awkward, right? Because you're kind of going, well, he goes on holidays. Has someone else taken over? All right. Or he's sick. You know, there are times when this bit of work doesn't happen. Okay. So what can we do about that one? So I'm going to bring in Power Automate in here. And it's going to look a little bit like this. I'm going to have a Power Automate component. And what it's doing is it's monitoring an Outlook account for emails from a particular user. When it gets those, it will take the attachments, detach them, and put them onto the file share. The way this works is the Power Gateway in the middle, the gateway connector. So far, we've been thinking of...
Sorry, I'm all right. I'm just on a meeting.
Sorry, you have to mute yourself, man.
No problem. I hope the meeting's going well. so we've been speaking about this Power Gateway, and it pulls data from these 3 files, but that gateway actually goes in 2 directions. You can put data back down through that gateway as well. So actually this data flow acts as my file share via that exact same gateway. I know I haven't got it drawn that way, but that is what actually happens in there. Okay. So we're going to have a look at how I built that flow and demo it. And also, this is where my Twitter comes into play, because as soon as I had Automate, it says, well, what else can I do in Automate? And the answer is you can do so much in Automate. I'm just showing you two things you can do in Automate. Okay, so let's have a quick look at that. So let's demo this up. So I'm going to go to flow.microsoft.com, because it used to be called Flow, right? So it's still available there. And I got a few different flows in here. I'm going to go looking at this one, Reboot, called Save My Attachment and Refresh. All right. So it looks like I haven't run this in 28 days. Nope, I definitely haven't. That's fine. So this will be fun. If I go in here, I'm doing my edit. Okay, and this is what my flow looks like in here. All right, so this is your kind of low code, no code environment. When an email arrives, so there's a couple of things behind that. When an email arrives, which means if I go looking at this one, it's got a connection to something, right? And you can see over there how it's got a connection to my account. So when an email arrives into my inbox, let's look at my advanced connections. There's a few criteria in here. It's got to arrive from this user, that's my Gmail account, and also in the subject header, it's got to contain reboot. When that happens, I want to apply to each. So what to apply to each what? Apply to each attachment. What do I apply to each of those attachments? Well, I want to do this. I want to create a file. So I go looking at create my file, and you can see in here, it's got a connection to something called Reboot Retail Sales. So that is the same gateway. That's the bit that is using my gateway connection back down onto my on-premise location. All right. So I've just mapped a file share basically that's cloud accessible. So I create a file in there. And having created a file, the next thing I want to do is I want to connect to Power BI Refresh Sales, which is still in preview. This has been in preview for at least a year now. Okay. And if I connect into here, the workspace is connecting to is Reboot Your Analytics, and I'm going to refresh that particular data set, which obviously means there's another connection going on in here, and it's my Power BI connection. Okay. So I'm building up a data flow to do a few things. So all going well, I'm going to try to trigger that data flow. So I'm going to pop over onto my Gmail, and you can see here I've got an email all ready to go. All right, going to myself, there's my reboot, and there's my attachments. So I'm going to send that. Okay. Now, all going well, this normally takes circa 30 seconds or so to kick in, all right? So let's go into here. Let's go into my file share. If I go into retail sales, these are all my files that I have currently. I've just heard a beep in my ear, so I'm hoping that in the next couple of seconds we're going to see an update here. There it has happened, okay? So you can see a new file arrives in there. I'm going looking for it. There it is, December 15. That was the one I wanted to add in, and there's another one down below in there as well. Okay, so that's happened. My files have arrived. Let's go back to my flow. All right, and we'll just do a repage in this. So you can see in there now how it's showing that that one has arrived. It has triggered in. It's given me a succeeded. If I go to PowerBI.com and go back to my data set, you should see that my data set in here, which is V1, has refreshed. And I can see there that that is reading just less than a minute ago. So it has done my refresh. And now if I go back onto my SharePoint home and I just do a repage of this, or I could do it via Teams as well if I wanted to. That'll repage, and I'm hoping that that 47K figure has changed, and it has.
Yay.
Yes, yay, the demo has worked yet again. Okay, so we are now up to 51K in there, okay? Now, while I'm in that flow mode, let's look at my sentiment side of things, and just to flick onto another flow. So I've got in here, I've got a reboot, a run sentiment analysis. You can see that this has been running away all the time, okay? And if I go and looking at the edit behind this to give you a flavor of what it looks like, I've got a tweet posted. So when a tweet is posted, so there's my connection to my Mark Data guy. When a tweet is posted, looking at hashtag Brexit, it does a detect sentiment. I don't know why it says test connection failed, because it actually works all the time. But anyway, I'm doing a connection here to my Sycamore Cognitive Services account, all right, which is another Azure service. And that just passes in my tweet text, and it gets back the it gets back the sentiment value. And then having got that, I'm inserting that data into a SQL database. So here's a connection to my Azure SQL database. All right, and it's putting in the retweet count, tweet text, tweeted by, etc., and down there the score. And the score is the bit that has come from my detect sentiment work. All right, so a nice little bit of flow work going in there to grab my sentiment, and then that's the bit that's been surfaced up in this one that you're seeing in here. Okay.
Is that thing doing a search on Twitter globally or just in your contact list?
It's picking up on any hashtag. I must look into this more to see how deep that actually goes in there, right? But basically, it's picking up. If I used to go into Twitter and do a search on hashtag Brexit, all right, I'll see loads of tweets to do with it. It's picking up on those. Okay.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I must actually go back and kind of finalize. You can see in there, actually, there's the actual email has arrived into my email account as well, obviously, because it's an email. All right. So let's go back to my PowerPoint. I'm near the end now. This is what we wanted to do. And this is my flow. I added a little bit of automate, file fresh, a little bit of fun with sentiment.
I got a question from the chat. Can
Yeah.
I take it now? Great demo. What's the cost we may expect from Power Automate?
So I'm using flow free there. Okay, so I have no cost occurred over the while. Right, basically flow or automate comes in a few different flavors. It's available with most Office 365 subscriptions. I won't say all of them, but it's definitely available with most of them. All right, and I think most of them give you what equates to kind of a one flow run every 15 minutes. All right, however, that doesn't mean you have to wait for 15 minutes for your flow to trigger. It just depends upon how many times the flow has triggered before then. So for my little demo in here, it generally comes in 30 seconds because obviously I'm not running that one a lot, all right? Whereas if I was to look at it from a, if I was to look at the Twitter sentiment one, which obviously is a lot more frequent, we'll probably see that a rough kind of every 15 minutes kind of happening in there, right? So like a lot happened there 31 minutes ago and then about an hour ago in there, all right? So really it just comes down to capacity. If you need more capacity, if you need to know, God, I needed to run quicker than that, then you got to go onto one of the paid flow plans, all right? Which is just an Office license in there. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but basically you can get flow for free. And you get SharePoint Online for free as well, or rather included as part of your Office 365 subscriptions in there. From licensing though, while in there, this is not a magic way to avoid a Power BI license, okay? As I'm looking at inside in here, all right, this is sharing a Power BI report to users which means every user has to have a Power BI Pro license or premium capacity. So this is not a way you can kind of go, oh great, I can give like 100 users access to my SharePoint page and I've only got one Power BI Pro license. Does not work that way. Your 100 users will need access onto it. So obviously you got to think about segmenting up your users. All right.
So it's the same licensing scheme that ClickView uses, and I guess many others.
Yeah,
it's easy to produce the report, and if you want to consume it, you'll pay for it.
Correct. So if you are doing something like this, you would have to kind of think, and generally what will happen is you'll have an AD group called Pro Users or something like that, right? And you're just kind of making sure that the set of people who go onto the Pro Users is, so the set of people who have access to SharePoint isn't greater than the set of people who are on the Pro Users account in there. So a few things like that to happen in there. Any more questions in there, Magnus? I've only got I think I've only got one slide left at this stage in there anyway, because I'm pretty much done with my demos.
I had one earlier from Laura, which was when the data is bad in the Excel, where do I fix it? In the Power BI again, or can I just fix the flow?
Yeah, so when data goes bad, when do you fix it, all right? I mean, look, my go-to answer there is always going to be is if you can, fix your data at source, all right? Don't do things to fix data inside and data flows or anywhere else, because then you just got developed another maintenance area in there. But from an Excel point of view, I try not to use Excel unless absolutely necessary, which is why that master data is now moved into SharePoint Online. But, and this is real, okay? I was yesterday fixing a problem inside an Excel for my client, okay? And they actually get data from 2 different aggregator companies. And one aggregator company never gives me an issue. And the other aggregator company, I'll get an issue once every couple of months with them, all right? And I know what the difference is. The first data aggregator company have it automated, and the second aggregator company, clearly there's a person doing the work, okay? Because the issue I had the other day was they had put in a new column. And I kind of go, well, a computer doesn't magically put in a new column, a user does, all right? So yeah, it can happen, you know, definitely. You can put error handling into Power BI, all right? So you can try to protect yourselves from those situations for sure. But yeah, you got to code for that. You got to plan for that. You know, there's no magic bullet there, unfortunately, to do with that.
I got some follow-ups. Laura is saying, like changes, I need to know if the flow is standalone from the report, not the data cleaning strategy. There is just, I need to leave this in 2 minutes, but I suggest, Laura, if you stick on to the meeting after I leave, and if you as well do, Mark, then you can just do it. It's easier to not do it in the chat. Just use the microphone when as soon as the recording is off. That's okay.
So I'm going to take 1 minute to finish this presentation, if that's okay. All right. And basically, this is my phase 4. I've got nothing to demo in here. I'm more just talking about the fact that really what I've been building up to is the Power Platform. Okay. And we've just been seeing, okay, we've seen Power BI side of things, we've seen the Flow side of things, we've seen the Office side of things in there from Office 365, SharePoint, and Excel. We've seen the connectors and the gateways connecting back onto on-premise. I haven't spoken about the common data model because I know zip, nada, nothing about the common data model, okay? Other than a very conceptual understanding of it. Power Apps, I know next to zip, nada, nothing on it. Okay, so again, I don't talk too much about it in there, all right? Other than it is basically a visual builder. It's a form builder. It will become part of my demo, and I actually have a client that needs me to start using something like that now. So it will become a part, but yeah, that's why it's not there. But you can see how the Power Platform's been used in there. Conclusions, lots of reporting and analytical needs can be addressed. You don't have to be IT to do it. However, it does help, right? It does help because sometimes data is not easy. Just because Power BI makes it seem wonderful, quick to get your data doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have an easy project in there, because there could be all sorts of complexity or needs or modeling or many-to-many dimensions in there, you know, lots of stuff. You could already own a lot of this stuff. Power BI, possibly not. However, the Office 365 gives you the ability to be doing SharePoint, portals, Teams, Power Automate. So then you buy your Power BI license with it and you get a lot more. It's software as a service cost, so it can get expensive or be amazingly cost effective. I mean, if you have 1,000 users, then 1,000 users by $850 a month isn't trivial, right? 8,500 a month. Maybe you should have a conversation about Power BI Premium, but even that is 5,000 a month. But what if you've got businesses who turn over 10, 20, 30 million, but they've only got 3 or 4 or 5 users who might need this, okay? For them, it's amazingly cost effective. And one of my clients is in that bucket. They turn over 20 million a year. They only got 6 people in the office who will ever need this type of reporting. All right. So it's completely different dynamic to have a conversation with them that you can kind of go, okay, it's $850 by 6. That's the cost of your license per month. All right. That's me done. I love your feedback. I have a website. If you go to Dave Smart Eval, or if you take a screenshot of that, you can give me a little bit of feedback on this session, which would be greatly appreciated. And that's my Dave Mark at Data, Mark Data Guy, and stuff like that. There's my links. All right. I am planning to put together a blog post on this actual session. It's not done yet. It'll be up there in the next week or two as well. All right. So you find that on my blog on there. Cool. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much. Magnus, I appreciate you have to head off, so you might want to kill off the recording in there, but I can stay online for another couple of minutes, guys, and have a chat or anything like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. It was actually, I just got a note that my next meeting is rescheduled, so I have another couple of minutes, but
super.
Still have to work though. But let's just do this. So I think I'm sharing the schedule. Thank you so much, Mark, for presenting to us. You have done this on the SQL User Group Sweden once, and it's pretty much the same presentation. I'm a slow learner. No, maybe not. This is all new stuff to me, so it was really worth repeating. And for the rest of you, if you need repeating, as I do, the video is going to come online in I don't know, one day maybe. If I'm fast, I'll do it tonight. So thank you for today. I'm gonna stop recording and sign out, but just stay on the meeting and chat with Mark as long as you want to. Yeah, that's it.
All right, great, guys. Thanks very much for having me, Magnus. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. So It was good, actually, because I hadn't done that in about a month. So I was feeling this morning, I was kind of going, oh my God, am I going to forget everything here? But it comes back. It comes back.
You did awesome. I'm going to do the eval as well. And I mean, everyone, please do. It helps speakers a lot to get the evaluation. I haven't prepared evaluations for SQL Friday, but Mark did for himself. So please do fill in the eval. It helps Mark improve the session further. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Stay online there, Laura, if you want to have a quick chat about anything like that.